The woman standing in my doorway had my husband's eyes. The two children clinging to her skirt had his smile. And the baby in her arms had the birthmark on his left shoulder that I'd kissed on Marcus every morning for 30 years. "Happy birthday, Aurelia," my husband said, his hand on the woman's back. "I'd like you to meet Livia. And our children." If this story makes your heart pound the way mine did that day, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss how this ends. And tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug because you're going to need it. I stood there in the archway of the home I'd built with my own inheritance, wearing the silk dress I'd bought for my 50th birthday celebration, and I smiled. Actually smiled. Because 30 years of being married to Marcus Flavius had taught me one critical lesson. Never let them see you break. "Come in," I said, my voice steady as stone. "You must be exhausted from your journey." The shock on Marcus's face was almost worth the knife twisting in my chest. Almost. He'd expected tears. Rage. The dramatic collapse of a betrayed wife. But I'd been raised by Cassia Marcella, a woman who taught me that revenge is a dish best served so cold it burns. Livia stepped inside, her eyes darting around our home with a mixture of awe and something else. Ownership, maybe. Or entitlement. She was younger than me by at least 15 years, still luminous in that way women are before life carves its lessons into their faces. The children were beautiful. Course they were. They were his. "The guest rooms are upstairs," I said, gesturing to the marble staircase. "Third and fourth doors on the right. I'll have the servants prepare something to eat." "Aurelia," Marcus started, but I raised one hand. "Not now, my love. Our guests need rest. We'll talk at dinner." I watched them climb the stairs, this secret family my husband had kept hidden like treasure in a locked vault. 30 years. 3 decades of lies, smooth as the olive oil he poured over his morning bread. How many business trips? How many late nights at the Forum? How many times had he held me and whispered that I was his only love while these children grew in another woman's womb? The baby started to cry, and I heard Livia soothing him in a voice meant for lullabies. A voice that had probably sung to Marcus too, in the dark hours when he told her whatever lies kept her satisfied with being the hidden wife. Because that's what she was. I could see it in the way he touched her, proprietary and comfortable. This wasn't an affair. This was a whole separate life. I walked to my study and locked the door. Then, and only then, did I let my hands shake. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, pushed aside the correspondence and contracts, and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a key. And that key opened a safe deposit box at the bank where I'd been making certain arrangements for the past 5 years. You see, I'd known. Not everything. Not about Livia or the children. But I'd known something was carved from our marriage that should have been there. I'd seen the way Marcus's eyes glazed over when I spoke about my work at the women's shelter. How he'd stopped asking about my day. The way intimacy between us had become a scheduled maintenance rather than a fire. So 5 years ago I'd hired an investigator. And I'd learned enough to start protecting myself. Moving assets. Documenting everything. Building a fortress around my future while pretending to sleep soundly in our bed. But I hadn't known about the children. That detail was new. And it changed everything. I sat at my desk and opened my ledger. Numbers had always made sense to me in ways people never did. Clean. Honest. Unchanging. 2 plus 2 always equaled 4, no matter how much someone lied. And the numbers in this ledger told a story Marcus didn't know I'd written. The fortune I'd inherited from my father, the shipping magnate. The properties I'd purchased in my own name. The investments I'd made through my cousin Octavius's firm. The business I'd built consulting for merchants who needed someone who understood both trade routes and politics. Every coin of it documented. Every asset protected. Marcus had his own money. Old family wealth from before we married. But our life, this house, the comfort he'd enjoyed, the social standing he'd leveraged, that came from my inheritance. And he'd been spending it to support another family. The betrayal was exquisite in its completeness. A knock at the door. "Mistress Aurelia." My housekeeper Julia. The master says dinner will be at the 8th hour. He's requested your presence. Tell him I'll be there, I said. And Julia? Have my jeweler's box brought to me. The large one. Yes, mistress. Had 3 hours. 3 hours to decide how to play this. 3 hours to choose between the woman I'd been raised to be and the woman this moment was forging. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. A woman's power lies in what she reveals and what she conceals. Master both, and you'll never be at any man's mercy. I opened the jeweler's box when Julia brought it. Inside were pieces accumulated over 30 years of marriage. Gifts from Marcus for birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. Each one a promise. Each one a lie, apparently. Rubies the color of the blood I wanted to spill. Emeralds like the envy I should feel but didn't, because Livia had won a prize that was rotting from the inside. And at the bottom, wrapped in silk, was the necklace Marcus had given me on our wedding night. A simple gold chain with a pendant shaped like a key. You hold the key to my heart, he'd said, fastening it around my neck. I held it up to the lamplight, watching it spin. Then I placed it carefully in a small velvet box, separate from the others. Dinner was served in our formal dining room, the one overlooking the garden where I'd planted night-blooming jasmine that filled the air with sweetness after dark. The table could seat 20, but tonight we were only 5. 6, counting the baby, who Livia held on her lap while trying to manage a plate. Let me hold him, I said, reaching out. You need to eat. Livia's eyes widened. She looked at Marcus, who looked at me with such naked suspicion that I almost laughed. I've held many babies, I said calmly. I volunteer at the women's shelter. The infant ward. I didn't mention that I'd buried 3 pregnancies between my 25th and 30th years. That the children Marcus and I were supposed to have never survived past the first season. That I'd mourned them in silence while he'd apparently been creating replacements elsewhere. Livia handed me the baby. He was warm and heavy, with that particular baby smell of milk and innocence. He looked up at me with Marcus's dark eyes and made a small, contented sound. His name is Cassius, Livia said quietly. Course it was. Strong Roman name. The kind of name you give a legitimate son. How old? Asked. 11 months. I nodded, doing the math. Marcus had been on an extended business trip to Ostia around that time. 2 months away. I'd stayed home, managing the household, hosting social gatherings, maintaining the fiction of our perfect marriage. And these are your older children. I addressed the 2 clinging to Livia's side. A girl of about 8, a boy around 6. Petronia and Quintus, Livia said. She had a provincial accent, I noticed. Somewhere north. Gaul maybe. Welcome to my home, I said, and meant it. 'Cause it was my home. Every stone paid for with my father's money. Every mosaic chosen by my eye. Every garden planted by my design. They were welcome. What happened next would determine how long they stayed. Marcus cleared his throat. Aurelia, I think we should discuss how you've maintained 2 families for 3 decades. I said pleasantly, passing the baby back to Livia so I could cut my lamb. Or how you decided that my birthday was the appropriate day to reveal your duplicity. I'm curious which conversation you'd prefer. Silence fell like a blade. Petronia, the little girl, started to whimper. Quintus stared at his plate. Livia had gone very pale. The children don't need to hear this, Marcus said tightly. The children are old enough to understand that their father is a liar, I replied, taking a sip of wine. But you're right. This isn't a conversation for dinner. I set down my cup. Livia, there's a nursery upstairs. 2nd floor, east wing. It hasn't been used in years, but it's still furnished. Julia will help you settle the children. Marcus and I will join you shortly. It wasn't a request. Livia heard it in my voice and rose immediately, gathering the children. She paused at the doorway. Thank you, she said, for being kind. I haven't been kind yet, I said. But I haven't been cruel either. Let's see which one I choose. When they were gone, Marcus stood so quickly his chair scraped the marble floor. What are you playing at, Aurelia? Playing? I dabbed my mouth with my napkin. I'm not playing anything. You brought your mistress and illegitimate children to our home on my birthday and expected. What? That I'd collapse in hysterics. That I'd throw you all out. That I'd make a scene. I expected you to react like a human being. Then you don't know your wife very well. Despite 30 years of marriage. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. I was going to tell you. When? On our 40th anniversary. Our 50th. Were you waiting for me to die so you could legitimize them without the inconvenience of my feelings? It's not like that. Then tell me what it's like, Marcus. I'm listening. I leaned back in my chair, every inch the lady of the house. Explain to me how you built an entire family while sharing my bed. How you named your son after my dead father, the man whose fortune you've been spending to support your other wife. How you looked me in the eyes every morning and lied. I love her. For words. Quiet. Brutal. Honest. I love her, he repeated. I have for 30 years. Since before I married you. The room tilted slightly, then righted itself. Before. It was arranged, he said. You know that. Our families made the match. Your father's wealth, my family's name. It was a business arrangement. And yet you spoke of love on our wedding night. I tried to love you, Aurelia. I did. But Livia. She was the one I wanted. She's the one I've always wanted. I stood slowly, every movement controlled. Then why marry me at all? Because I had no choice. My family needed your dowry. We were losing everything. Your father's ships, your trade connections, they saved us. And you were so eager, so in love with the idea of being my wife. How could I? So you took my money and my devotion and gave me 3 decades of lies. I walked to the window, looking out at the jasmine I'd planted in the first year of our marriage. Did you laugh about it? When you were with her, did you laugh about the naive girl who believed you? No, never. Aurelia, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. I turned to face him. You're a coward who wanted everything. The wealth, the status, the legitimate marriage, and the woman you actually loved. So you took it all. But you made one critical mistake. What's that? You underestimated me. I walked past him, heading for the stairs. We'll discuss the details in the morning. For tonight, sleep wherever you like. I assume you'll want to be with Livia. You've certainly earned that right by betraying me. Aurelia, don't. I didn't look back. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Save it for tomorrow, when I've decided what to do with you all. In my chambers, I finally let the mask slip. I sat on the edge of the bed Marcus and I had shared for 30 years and felt the weight of the day settle on my shoulders like stones. But I didn't cry. Tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. Instead, I went to my dressing table and opened another drawer. Inside was a correspondence I'd been maintaining with a lawyer in Rome. A sharp woman named Flavia who specialized in cases of marital fraud and property law. I'd consulted her 5 years ago, when I'd first suspected Marcus's infidelity. Now I pulled out her most recent letter and read it again. Aurelia, in response to your inquiry. Yes, if you can prove your husband has maintained a second household using your dowry funds, you have grounds not only for divorce but for reclamation of all marital assets. The law is clear. Fraudulent misappropriation of a wife's property is actionable. However, you must have documentation. Records of expenditures, witnesses, evidence of the relationship's duration, and your financial support of it. Without this, your case is weak. With it, you could leave him with nothing. I had documentation. Years of it. Every suspicious transaction Marcus had made through our shared accounts. Every unexplained journey. Every gift charged to our household that I'd never received. I'd been building this case without even knowing the full scope of his betrayal. Now I knew. And the knowledge was power. But there was something else in this moment, something unexpected. Looking at Livia, at those children, I'd seen something I recognized. Desperation. The way she'd looked at Marcus wasn't love. It was dependence. And the way she'd looked at our home wasn't greed. It was exhaustion. She was trapped too. Just in a different cage. An idea began to form. Dangerous. Radical. The kind of idea my mother would have called brilliant or insane, with no middle ground. I pulled out parchment and began to write. Morning came with rain. I woke early, dressed in simple clothes instead of my usual elegant robes, and went downstairs to find Livia already in the kitchen, nursing the baby while trying to manage the older children's breakfast. "Where's Julia?" I asked. "I sent her away," Livia said. "I didn't want to be a burden. You're feeding 3 children in my kitchen. You're already a burden. The question is what kind." I poured myself tea from the pot she'd made. "How did you meet him?" She looked up surprised. "Marcus." "No, the emperor." "Yes, Marcus." A small smile crossed her face despite everything. "A festival. In Lugdunum. I was 17. He was traveling for his family's business. He said I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. And you believed him." "I was 17, she repeated. "Young. Stupid. In love. And then he had to return to Rome. To marry you. He told me about the arrangement, how his family needed it. He promised he'd come back for me. And he did. Every few months at first, then more regularly. He set me up in a small house. Gave me enough to live on. And I waited. Always waiting. For 30 years. For 30 years. Livia looked down at Cassius. "I thought. When you couldn't have children, I thought eventually he'd divorce you. Claim one of ours as his heir. But he kept saying it wasn't the right time. Your father was still alive, your money still necessary. Then your father died, but you'd become important in your own right. Your business, your social connections. There was always a reason. Until now. Until now." She met my eyes. "I didn't want to come here. I told him it was cruel. But he said he was tired of lying. That we should all live openly as a family. That you'd understand." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Understand. That my husband of 30 years wants to install his mistress in my home and legitimize the children he had with her while I mourned the babies I lost? Yes, I understand perfectly. I understand that Marcus is a narcissistic fool who believes his own comfort is more important than anyone else's suffering." Petronia and Quintus had stopped eating, staring at me with wide eyes. I softened my voice. "Forgive me. That was unfair to say in front of your children." "It was true," Livia said quietly. "I've been telling myself pretty stories for 30 years. That he loved me. That we'd be together. That this was somehow romantic instead of pathetic. But you're right. I was convenient. Someone who asked for nothing and accepted scraps. And now I'm 57 years old with 3 children and no skills except waiting for a man who was never really mine." She laughed bitterly. "I don't even have the dignity of being a proper villain in this story. I'm just another one of his victims." I studied her. Really looked at her. The lines around her eyes. The way her hands shook slightly when she held the baby. The weariness that went bone deep. "What if," I said slowly, "you weren't a victim anymore?" "What do you mean?" "What if I told you I have a plan? One that gets both of us free of Marcus, sets you and your children up for life, and makes him pay for what he's done to us both." Livia stared at me. "Why would you help me?" "Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And because I'm tired of being the good wife who suffers in silence." I leaned forward. "But I need to know something first. Do you love him? Really love him? Or are you just dependent on him?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I don't know who he is anymore. The man who visits me, who plays with the children for a few days then leaves for months. That's not love. That's obligation. If I'm honest, I stopped loving him years ago. But I had nowhere else to go." "Then listen carefully," I said. "Because what I'm about to propose will require us to work together. And if either of us falters, we both lose everything." For the next hour I laid out my plan. Livia listened, her expression moving from shock to understanding to something that might have been respect. "You've been planning this for years," she said. "Not this exactly. But I've been preparing for something. Marcus isn't the only one who can keep secrets. And if he refuses, he won't. Because by the time we're done, refusing will cost him everything he values. His reputation, his family name, his status. Men like Marcus don't care about love or loyalty. They care about power and appearance. We're going to take both." Livia looked at her children, then back at me. "What do you need me to do?" "First, tell me everything. Every property he owns, every account he's set up for you, every promise he's made. I need documentation of it all. Witnesses if possible. Letters. Anything that proves he's been using my dowry to support your household. I have letters. Years of them. And receipts. I kept everything because I thought. I don't know what I thought. That someday they'd matter. They matter now. Get them all. We'll catalog everything. And then," I smiled. "Then we invite Marcus to a meeting. All three of us. And we give him a choice." "What kind of choice?" "The kind where every option costs him, but one costs him less than the others. The kind where he thinks he's negotiating but we're really dictating terms. The kind where he ends up giving us everything we want and believes it was his idea." For the first time since she'd arrived, Livia smiled. Really smiled. "You're terrifying." "Thank you," I said. "I'm taking it as a compliment." We spent the day gathering evidence. Livia had been meticulous, it turned out. Every letter Marcus had sent, bundled by year. Every contract for the houses he'd rented for her over the decades. Every bill for the children's tutors, their clothes, their necessities. She'd kept it all, like a chronicle of her own diminishment. I added my own documentation. The ledgers I'd maintained. The investigation reports. The letters from my lawyer. The property deeds showing what I'd inherited versus what Marcus claimed. By evening, we had built a case that would destroy him. "One question," Livia said as we worked. "Why are you doing this? You could divorce him, take your share and move on. Why involve me?" I considered the question. "Because I'm tired of women being pitted against each other for men's crimes. You're not my enemy." "Yes. And because I think we can do more together than apart. And," I paused, "because I don't have children. But you do. And they deserve better than being bastards dependent on their father's whims. They deserve security. Future. And I can give them that. In exchange for your testimony, your cooperation, and afterward your friendship if you're willing." Livia's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your kindness. This isn't kindness. This is strategy. But if it looks like kindness from the outside, I'll accept that too." I handed her a handkerchief. "Save the tears for Marcus. He's going to need to believe you're emotionally compromised. That you're breaking down. That you're weak. Can you do that?" She wiped her eyes and straightened her spine. "I've been pretending for 30 years. I can pretend a little longer." "Good. Because tonight we make our move." I sent word that Marcus should meet us in the formal receiving room after dinner. He arrived looking wary, as he should. Livia and I were seated side by side on the long couch, the documentation spread on the table before us like weapons. "What is this?" Marcus asked. "This is your reckoning," I said. "Sit down." He remained standing. "I'm not going to be ambushed in my own home." "Your home. That's interesting." Picked up a deed. "Because according to this, the deed to this property is in my name alone. Purchased with my inheritance. As are the villa in Capri, the apartment in Rome, and the farm in Tuscany. Your name appears on none of them." His face paled. "That's a formality." We agreed. We agreed to nothing. My father ensured all property acquired with my dowry remained in my name. A wise man, my father. Almost as if he knew what kind of man you were. I set the deed down. "But let's talk about property you do control. Like the house in Lugdunum where Livia lives. And the one before that. And the one before that. 6 houses over 30 years, all rented with funds from our household accounts. Accounts funded by my business ventures and my inheritance. I can explain. Can you explain this? Livia held up a letter. This is from you, dated 12 years ago. You write, use the money I sent to enroll Quintus in school. Tell him his father loves him even if the world can't know he's mine. The money you sent came from an account you share with your wife. You were using Aurelia's money to support our son while telling her you were investing in shipping ventures. Marcus grabbed for the letter, but Livia pulled it back. There are dozens more. All documenting your fraud. Your betrayal of your marriage vows and your misappropriation of funds. This is blackmail, Marcus hissed. No, I said calmly. This is negotiation. Blackmail would be if we threatened to expose you unless you paid us. But we don't want your money. We have our own plan. We're simply offering you a choice in how this plays out. What do you want? First, a divorce. Uncontested. With a settlement that returns every coin of my dowry and earnings to my control. You'll sign over any claim to the properties, the businesses, and the assets acquired during our marriage. That would leave me with nothing. Not nothing. You'd still have your family name. Your personal accounts, the ones that existed before we married. The social connections I haven't poisoned yet. And your dignity, if you agree quickly and quietly. And if I refuse, then we take this documentation to the magistrates. We file charges of fraud and breach of marriage contract. We make it a public spectacle. Every patrician family in Rome will know that Marcus Flavius married for money, stole from his wife to support his mistress, and produced illegitimate children while his lawful wife suffered. Your family name will be ruined, your social standing destroyed, and you'll still lose everything in court, but with the added pleasure of public humiliation. His jaw worked. You vindictive. Careful, Livia said softly. You're already in a precarious position. Don't make it worse. He looked between us, finally understanding. You've been planning this together. We've been comparing notes, I said. Turns out we have a lot in common. We've both loved you. We've both been lied to. We've both wasted years on a man who valued himself above everyone else. The difference is, we're done wasting time. There's a second condition, Livia said. You're going to legitimize the children. What? Petronia, Quintus, and Cassius. You're going to formally acknowledge them as your heirs. Aurelia has agreed to adopt them legally, giving them her family name and her protection. But they need your acknowledgement for full legal standing. You want me to claim them publicly. We're requiring it, I corrected. It's part of the divorce settlement. You acknowledge them, I adopt them, and they become heirs to my estate. Your family name continues through them, which is what you've always wanted. And they're protected, which is what they deserve. And what does Livia get? I'm setting her up with a business, I said. She's going to manage a textile workshop I'm purchasing. She'll have an income, property of her own, and independence. Something you never gave her. Marcus stared at us. I could see him calculating, weighing his options. Pride versus pragmatism. His reputation versus his comfort. How do I know you won't expose me anyway? Because we'll have what we want. And because, despite everything, I'm not cruel. I don't want to destroy you, Marcus. I just want to be free of you. We both do. He was silent for a long moment. Then, if I agree to this, the divorce is quiet. No scandal. As quiet as we can make it. We'll say it's an amicable separation. Irreconcilable differences. No one needs to know the details. And I can still see the children. Livia and I exchanged glances. Supervised visits, Livia said. If they want to see you. But you don't get to dictate their lives anymore. They're not your secret shame. They're people. With rights and futures. Another long silence. Then Marcus nodded. I'll sign your documents. Wise choice, I said, pulling out the contracts we'd had drawn up. Your lawyer can review them if you'd like, but I assure you they're fair. More fair than you deserve, frankly. He took the papers with shaking hands. As he read through them, I watched his face cycle through emotions. Anger, humiliation, relief. By the end, he looked exhausted. "Where will I go?" he asked quietly. "That's not my concern," I said. "You have resources. Use them. Build a new life. Find a new wife to lie to if you must. But you're done lying to us." He signed each document, his signature getting shakier with each one. When it was done, he set down the pen and looked at me. "Did you ever love me, Aurelia?" I considered lying, giving him that last kindness. But I was done with lies. "I loved who I thought you were. The man you pretended to be on our wedding night. But that man never existed. No, Marcus. I never loved you. I loved a phantom. And I mourned him when I realized the truth. But I'm done mourning." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "It's worth nothing," I said. "But I accept it anyway." He left that night, took a few belongings and disappeared into the rain, and I watched from my window as his figure became smaller and smaller until he was just another shadow in the dark. "Is it really over?" Livia asked, coming to stand beside me. "The hard part is over. Now comes the living part. The figuring out who we are when we're not defined by him." "I don't know who that is." "Neither do I admitted. "But I think we get to decide. That's the gift in all of this. We get to choose." The next morning, I woke to the sound of children playing in the garden. Petronia and Quintus had discovered the fountain, and their laughter rang out like bells. Livia sat on a bench nearby, Cassius on her lap, watching them with an expression I couldn't quite read. I joined her, sitting in companionable silence for a moment. "Thank you," she said finally, "for giving them this home, safety, a future." "Thank you for trusting me," I replied. "It would have been easy to believe I was the enemy. You still might be. We barely know each other. Then we'll learn. We have time now. All the time in the world." Petronia ran up to us, breathless and bright-eyed. "Aunt Aurelia, is it true you have boats? Papa said you have ships that sail all the way to Egyptus." "I do," I said. "Would you like to see them someday?" "Yes." She bounced on her toes. "Can Quintus come too?" "Of course. We'll make a trip of it. All of us." "All of us?" Livia asked quietly. "All of us," I confirmed. "Unless you'd rather I not include you." "No, She smiled. "Like that. Trip. Together. Like a family." "We are a family," I said. "A strange one. An unconventional one. But a family nonetheless." And it was true. Over the following months, we built something neither of us had expected. Livia proved brilliant at managing the textile business. She had an eye for quality and a head for numbers, skills she'd never been allowed to develop while waiting for Marcus to return. The children thrived with stability, proper education, and the knowledge that they were wanted. As for me, I discovered that freedom had a taste. Sharp and sweet at once, like good wine. I traveled, expanded my business, made connections that had nothing to do with being someone's wife. Flavia, my lawyer, became a close friend. We partnered on several cases, defending women who found themselves in situations similar to mine. Marcus faded into irrelevance. We heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to a smaller city, remarried within a year to someone with a decent fortune, and was trying to rebuild his reputation. I felt nothing when I heard. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just the distant acknowledgement that he was someone I used to know. The only time I saw him again was at Quintus's coming-of-age ceremony. He showed up uninvited, standing at the back of the forum while I formally presented the boy, my adopted son, to society. After the ceremony, he approached me. "He looks well. He is well. They all are. Because of you. Because they're free of you," I corrected. "They would have been fine either way. Children are resilient." "Aurelia, Don't," I said. "Whatever apology you're crafting, save it. I don't need it. I don't need anything from you." I need something from you, he said quietly. I need to know you don't hate me. I looked at him, really looked at him. He'd aged poorly. Gray in his hair, lines in his face that spoke of stress and regret. The man I'd married was gone, replaced by this diminished version. I don't hate you, I said honestly. I don't feel anything for you at all. You're less than a memory. You're a lesson I learned and moved past. That's worse than hate. Is it? I wouldn't know. I've been too busy living to worry about your feelings. He left after that and I never saw him again. Heard he died a few years later. Quiet. Unremarkable. Exactly the ending he'd earned. But that wasn't my ending. Mine came decades later, surrounded by the children I'd adopted and the woman who'd become my closest companion. Livia and I never called ourselves anything more than friends, though toward the end, I think we were something deeper. Partners. Survivors. Women who'd taken the wreckage of one man's lies and built something beautiful. Tell me again, Petronia said, sitting by my bedside in those final days. She was a woman herself now, with children of her own. Tell me about the day Papa brought us to your home. You remember it. I remember you smiled. I thought you were kind. I didn't understand then that you were also terrifying. I laughed, though it hurt my chest. I was both. Still am, I hope. You are, Quintus said from the doorway. Mother Livia says you're impossible when you're ill. Won't rest. Won't stop working. Life is work, I said. Might as well do it until the end. Tell the story, Mama, Petronia urged. The one about the box. Box. I'd almost forgotten. When your father brought you all to my home that day, I smiled. You remember that. What you don't remember is what happened 3 days later, when the lawyers had finished, and Marcus was packing his things. I could still see it clearly. The morning light streaming through the atrium. Marcus in his traveling clothes, one last bag in his hands. He'd paused at the door, unable to leave without some final word. I suppose you're happy now, he'd said. You've won. I haven't won anything, I'd replied. I've simply stopped losing. What's the difference? Everything. And then I'd handed him the small velvet box. The one containing the necklace from our wedding night. The key to his heart, he'd called it. What's this? He'd asked. A gift. For the road. He'd opened it, seen the necklace, and his face had done something complicated. Why? Because you gave it to me promising it meant something. And I'm returning it to show that it didn't. That key never fit any lock that mattered. It was just another pretty lie. And I don't carry lies with me anymore. They're too heavy. He'd closed the box slowly. You've become cruel, Aurelia. No, I'd said. I've become honest. There's a difference. Though I understand why you'd confuse them. That was the last thing I ever said to him. Not goodbye. Not forgiveness. Just truth, handed back like a returned purchase that never fit right. Did you really say that? Quintus asked now, grinning. Every word. Your mother was watching from upstairs. She told me later she'd never seen anyone look so completely defeated. He deserved it, Petronia said fiercely. She'd always been the most protective of me, perhaps because she remembered what it was like to be the secret child, the one no one could acknowledge. Perhaps, I said. But that's not why I did it. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to be free. To let go of the weight of pretending that necklace ever meant what he said it did. Livia came in then, carrying tea that I wouldn't drink and medicine I didn't want. But I smiled at her anyway because after all these years, her presence still meant safety. They're making you tell stories again, she said. I'm an old woman. Stories are all I have left. You have us, she said simply. You've always had us. And that was true. After Marcus left, after the divorce was finalized, after the children were legally mine and the businesses were thriving, Livia and I had built something I'd never expected. Not romance exactly, though there were moments that felt like it. But partnership. The kind of deep understanding that comes from weathering the same storm and choosing to rebuild together. We'd traveled Taught the children about trade and business and how to read people the way my mother had taught me. We'd hosted salons where women discussed philosophy and politics without men telling them they were thinking wrong. We'd created space for ourselves in a world that said we should disappear. Do you regret it? Petronia asked. Any of it? Thought about that. 30 years with Marcus. The betrayal. The pain of discovering his other family. The shock of seeing his children with my eyes staring back at me. I regret the time I wasted believing his lies, I said finally. But I don't regret what came after. 'Cause what came after gave me you. All of you. And that's worth more than any perfect marriage built on truth would have been. That doesn't make sense, Quintus said. Love rarely does, Livia said, taking my hand. But we make sense of it anyway. The children left eventually, called away by their own lives, their own families. Livia stayed. She always stayed. Do you think he ever understood? She asked when we were alone. What he threw away? I don't know. Hope not. I hope he died thinking he'd been wronged instead of being the one who did wrong. It's a kindness he doesn't deserve, but I'm too tired to care about his suffering. You were never cruel enough to make a good enemy. Neither were you. We're both too practical. Why waste energy on hate when we can spend it on living? She laughed. Listen to us. Philosophers in our old age. Survivors, I corrected. There's a difference. Is there? I think surviving makes you philosophical whether you want to be or not. I closed my eyes, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. But content. That was the surprising part. After everything, after 30 years of lies and 1 day of truth and decades of rebuilding, I was content. Livia. Yes. Thank you. For trusting me that day. For not running when you could have. For building this with me. Where would I have run to? You were the first person in 30 years who saw me as more than Marcus's secret. You gave me a life. Purpose. A family that wasn't hidden in shadows. We gave each other those things. Yes, she agreed. We did. I died 3 weeks later. Peaceful. Surrounded by people I'd chosen, in a home I'd built, with assets I'd protected and a legacy I'd crafted deliberately. The children, my children, because they'd become mine in all the ways that mattered, they mourned appropriately. Then they carried on the businesses, the values, the lessons about strength and survival and the power of women standing together. Livia lived another 5 years. She never remarried. When people asked why, she'd say she'd had enough of marriage in her youth. But Petronia told me later that she'd kept a small portrait of me in her room. Not a grand thing. Just a simple sketch one of the children had made. And sometimes late at night she'd talk to it. Tell me about her day. Ask my advice. Do you think they're together now? Petronia's daughter asked at Livia's funeral. Aurelia and grandmother Livia. In whatever comes after. I think they're wherever they want to be, Petronia had said. Those two never let anyone else dictate their paths. Why would death be different? And maybe that's the point of this whole story. Not the betrayal, though that's where it started. Not the revenge, though that's what people want to hear. But the choice. The moment when I stood in my doorway and saw my husband's secret family and decided not to break. Decided to bend instead, to pivot, to turn betrayal into opportunity. I could have collapsed. Could have played the victim. Could have spent the rest of my life mourning what I'd lost. And no one would have blamed me. 30 years of marriage destroyed in a single afternoon. That's tragedy enough for any woman. But I'd been raised by Kasia Marcella, and she'd taught me that tragedy is just the beginning of a story, not the end. What matters is what you do next. How you rise. How you rebuild. How you take the broken pieces of your life and make something sharp enough to cut yourself free. So I smiled. I smiled at the woman with my husband's eyes and the children with his smile. And I made a choice. Not to be destroyed, but to be transformed. And in that transformation, I found something better than the marriage I'd lost. Found myself. Found Livia. I found a family built on choice instead of obligation. I found a life that was mine, every single piece of it, earned and protected and defended. Marcus thought he was bringing his worlds together that day. Thought he could have everything. His legitimate wife's money, his beloved mistress's comfort, his children's adoration and society's respect. He thought he could orchestrate it all, control it all, make us all fit into the life he'd designed. But he'd forgotten one critical detail. He'd forgotten that the women he'd lied to were more than just supporting characters in his story. We were the protagonists of our own. And when we stopped waiting for him to write our endings and started writing them ourselves, everything changed. That's what I'd give you if I could. Not the money, though I left plenty of that. Not the businesses, though they're still thriving. Not even the family, though they're extraordinary. What I'd give you is the knowledge that came too late to me but might come early to you. You are not the person someone else says you are. You are not defined by their lies or their betrayals or their failures. You are defined by what you do when everything falls apart. By the choices you make when there are no good options. By the way you rise when you have every reason to stay down. Marcus gave me 30 years of lies. But in return I gave myself 40 years of truth. And in the arithmetic of a life I came out ahead. So when someone brings their betrayal to your door, smile. Not because it doesn't hurt. Not because you're not breaking inside. But because you refuse to let them see you as less than you are. And then when they're gone, when the door is closed and the masks can come off, do the hard work of saving yourself. Gather your evidence. Protect your assets. Find your allies. Build your case. And when you're ready, when you're strong enough, strike. Not from anger, though anger is allowed. But from strategy. From the clear-eyed understanding that you deserve better and you're going to take it. That's the gift in betrayal, though it doesn't feel like it at the time. It's permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to stop making yourself smaller. Permission to stop believing that someone else's love is more valuable than your own freedom. Marcus gave me that permission on my 50th birthday, though he didn't mean to. He showed me who he really was. And in doing so, he freed me to become who I really was. A woman who smiled when she should have screamed. Who strategized when she should have collapsed. Who turned betrayal into liberation and loss into gain. Who took a mistress and illegitimate children and made them family. Who spent 40 years proving that the best revenge isn't destruction but transformation. That woman was always inside me. But it took Marcus's betrayal to let her out. So thank you, Marcus, wherever you are. Thank you for being exactly who you were. For lying so completely that the truth became unavoidable. For betraying me so thoroughly that I had no choice but to save myself. For being the villain in my story so I could become the hero. And thank you to the women who survived their own Marcuses. Who smiled when they should have screamed. Who strategized instead of collapsed. Who took betrayal and turned it into something that couldn't destroy them. You know who you are. You know what it cost. And you know what you gained. We are the women who gave the box back. Who returned the false promises and walked away from the lies. Who built families from wreckage and businesses from betrayal, and lives from the ruins of marriages that were dead long before they ended. We are the women who smiled. And we are the women who survived. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to smile through betrayal or strategize through pain, I want to hear from you. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Tell me your story if you're ready. Or just tell me you understand, because sometimes that's enough. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I have more stories like this. Stories about women who refused to be broken. Who turned tragedy into triumph. Who smiled when they should have screamed and came out stronger for it. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you are not defined by someone else's betrayal. You are defined by what you do next. The box I gave Marcus that day was empty of meaning. But the box I'm giving you now is full of it. Full of the knowledge that you can survive. That you can rebuild. That you can smile through the pain and come out the other side transformed. Take it. Open it. And use what's inside to build the life you deserve. 'Cause that's what I did. And if a woman in ancient Rome could do it with nothing but her inheritance, her intelligence, and her absolute refusal to be destroyed, then you can do it too. You can smile. You can strategize. You can survive. And you can become the hero of your own story, no matter who tried to write you as a victim. That's my final gift to you. Not the story of how I was betrayed, but the story of how I refused to let betrayal be the end. How I made it the beginning instead. The beginning of freedom, of truth, of a life that was finally, completely mine. And how you can too. Now go. Take that smile, that strategy, that survival instinct, and use it to build something beautiful from whatever betrayal tried to destroy you. 'Cause that's what we do. We women who smile. We women who survive. We take the box they give us, full of lies and broken promises, and we give it back. Empty of their meaning, full of our own. And then we walk away. Not broken, but transformed. Not destroyed, but remade. Not victims, but victors. That's the story. That's the truth. That's the gift. Take it. It's yours. Just like your life is yours. Just like your future is yours. Just like your happiness is yours. No one can take those things from you unless you let them. And I'm here to tell you, don't let them. Smile instead. Strategize. Survive. And when you do, when you come out the other side transformed and free and finally, completely yourself, remember where you learned it. From a woman named Aurelia who stood in her doorway on her 50th birthday, saw her husband's betrayal walk in with a smile, and decided in that moment that she would not be broken. She would be remade. And so can you. That's my story. That's my truth. That's my gift to you. Use it well. And tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you that hug. Because you've earned it. Just by being here. Just by listening. Just by understanding that sometimes the most revolutionary act is refusing to break. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the kind of person who understands that survival is a strategy and transformation is a choice. Now go. Live. Survive. Transform. And when you do, remember. You learned it from a woman who smiled.